Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us to stay curious today. Got the Florida Peninsula behind me here, where we're right over my shoulder here. Hope that y'all are getting ready for a wonderful, safe 4th of July weekend to celebrate our nation's birthday. And today we've got a little bit of a special Stay Curious program for you today. We've got two astronaut birthdays today. They both happen to be women. Uh, and I put them on Facebook, Linda Godwin and Wendy Lawrence. Linda's 72 today and Wendy's 65. So she'll be getting all that Medicare mail hitting her mailbox here for the next rest of her life. But we've met Wendy many times, and reading about Wendy Lawrence, background for today's show. She wrote a piece about her dad, who is a Navy Admiral, that I'm going to share with you, that really got to me in an emotional way. But it's also a story about who can inspire you, and a little bit of story about families. So hope that you enjoy this little different type of a program where we're going to talk about Wendy Lawrence's Admiral father for a little bit of the program here. But we've got regular things to talk about also today, as we're glad that you're all with us. After all, you know, the American Space Museum for over 20-some years has been preserving the birth of America's space age, where it all began in Brevard County, right over my shoulder. And this lady has certainly been a part of this museum and all that we represent the last 20-some years. We've talked about Karan Conklin is battling serious cancer issues. So we want you to please keep her in our thoughts and prayers as she has gotten out of the hospital and she's home in the comfort of her home there. This is not a hospice situation at the moment, but she is seriously ill, and we want everyone to know why she's not been in the building and out doing things for the museum. So God bless Karen's family as they're all struggling with this, and hopefully we can get her back in recovery. 11 beautiful shuttles of the month of July, and what we love talking about that we think nobody else talks about in social media is our space shuttle program. 30 years that have changed our world, the way we live today. You better believe some of the conveniences, most of them that you enjoy today, from your smartphone, computer in your hand, to maybe your smart car that tells you don't turn left, you're going to run into somebody, dummy. These are all parts of what the shuttle era brought us from 1981 to 2011. Hard to believe we're going to be celebrating 13 years since STS-135 took off. That's the shuttle in the upper right-hand corner. So these 11 shuttles had 68 humans, Earthlings, leave the bonds of Earth to go to space. 15 of them were women. Several of the men punched multiple tickets in the month of July. And we'll highlight these missions, not only talk about the missions, but the art behind the patches. But STS-94 in the upper left-hand corner was a repeat of 83, just less than 4 months earlier, that had to be aborted in orbit after nearly 4 days because of a fuel cell problem. STS-121 is the only mission in NASA's history launched on our nation's birthday, July 4th. 65 had the first Japanese woman go to space, Mukai, and was an important materials mission program there, the IML, the International Microgravity Lab, so I'm trying to spit out. 135, the final mission there that was so flawless. 104 put the Quest module up for EVAs outside of the International Space Station. STS-70 is known for northern flicker woodpeckers that pounded on the external tank and had to be brought into the VAB. 127, a hard hat mission to the International Space Station, has our new friend Julie Payette, Canadian astronaut, on there. Julia will be in our museum her next visit, and we'll do a Stay Curious with her in November. 93, Eileen Collins commanded the Gamma Ray Observatory that astronomers are trying to still keep in place up there, find the money to run it. And then Collins commanded the return to flight in 2005 after the Columbia accident, a very important flight that Wendy Lawrence, birthday girl today, also was on that return to flight. STS-51F, what can you say about that? It was the Cola Wars. And J.D. Bartow, our friend that was at our Shuttle Fest 3 this year, loves talking about the how the Coke and Pepsi had dispensers to drink the soda in space. And then we end the month on the last day of the month with STS-46, our friend Andy Allen, who's running his own aerospace company, Aerodyne, was the pilot of that tethered satellite, a concept that worked, but I've asked, why wouldn't we have tethered satellites off the International Space Station making energy and so forth? So it just might not have been so practical. So hope that you all join us through the month of July when we're talking about these fabulous shuttle missions. We'll have Mikey Haddad, payload level 4 engineer, talking about these. And Terry White will be on to talk about the shuttle garages that he was a chief of and what kind of pit stops they had to have in the month of July. So stay tuned to stay curious, and you will always satisfy your curiosity about the shuttle era. Well, let's get to our birthday ladies today. Happy birthday to this lady, Linda Godwin, 72. She was born in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, but grew up in Jackson, Missouri. She flew to space 4 times, as did Wendy Lawrence, and both these ladies combined 8 missions and over 90 days in space. So she flew at the Gamma Ray Observatory mission in July with Eileen Collins as her commander. She did the 3rd Mir docking and exchanged expedition crews in the beginning. There she is looking contemplative in that pixelated picture there. There's where we love to show some different pictures that you never see these astronauts, and that's her rookie picture. You can always tell that because they don't have any crew mission patches on there, and gives you an idea of her handwriting. Logged over 38 days in space, including 2 spacewalks for 10 hours. She has a doctorate degree in physics and was a teacher at the University of Missouri after her career with NASA, and she was married to her first commander, Steve Nagel, who died of cancer 10 years ago in 2014. And here's a cool picture I found of Linda at a telescope there at the University of Missouri there. Just love showing you different pictures of astronauts that you don't normally see out there. She's one I'd love to talk to her. Hopes that she participates in the women's events this year out at the Kennedy Space Center. But happy 72nd birthday to Linda Godwin, born July 2nd, 1952 in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. And there's Wendy Lawrence, nicknamed Too Short, as her badge there says. She wears it proudly. She's the first female Navy Academy graduate to go to space, and her father, Vice Admiral William Lawrence, was a Mercury astronaut finalist. He washed out because of a heart murmur that maybe if he took like the heart medicine Metropolol, like I'm taking, would clear that up. But this was the 60s, actually 58, 59 when he tried to be an astronaut. We're going to talk about Admiral Lawrence here in something that Wendy wrote about her father. She visited the Mir space station twice, the 7th and 9th final dockings. She, in fact, was going to stay on a long-duration flight there. She's a popular person out at Kennedy Space Center. I did say that she was where she was born in Jacksonville, Florida. Yeah, born in Jacksonville, Florida, July 2nd, 1959. Welcome to the golden senior years. There she is with Nick Thomas, SLS days about a year ago, and over a year ago actually. And she comes out to Space Center 3 times a year usually, sometimes every quarter, and so we know Nick knows her very well. Nick was on our program yesterday. Check out our YouTube library of Stay Curious episodes. Nick and he turned the tables on me and asked me some questions about the space program going on today, and a lot of people enjoyed the show yesterday. We'll have him back once a month. We're going to talk about movies and books on different segments here at the suggestion of some of you today on there. And by the way, some of you watching today, including I left my list over there of people I was going to shout out to today. Is there a orange piece there with some people's names scratched on it there? We got a couple of people. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, Andrew Oliva's watching today. Howard Pepper, John McBride Jr. He shouted out to us on a Facebook post. Nadim Hamad and Hilda Hanks is watching. And I know Hazel Banks is probably watching out there too. So thank you all for spending a little bit of your time watching our video podcast today. That, like I said earlier, Marty Winkel, my co-producer, and I have done over 1,080 shows. He's here in the studio, and we've got intern Logan Cope helping us out today. Logan's a student at Eastern Florida State College, and appreciate him learning the ropes here today. Let's see, both of these people, all right, that was Wendy's space background, 4 missions. She was on the Astro 2 flight, too, that was very interesting. There she is with our friend Carlton Bailey and Fodzilla there, the Godzilla toy, for better words. She gave a great talk. You can tell she's got the military background in her there. I remember asking her 2 trips to the International Space or Mir Space Station. What can you say about it? She said they needed some house cleaning. I said, was there a difference between the 2 years that she went up there? And she says, nope, they didn't throw away anything. Everything was in the same place, very cramped, hard to get around. And I'm sure you were happy that you went nose blind after, so you couldn't smell some of the things up there. But we love talking to her. There is a great picture I saw of her training for extravehicular activity or rescue. That would probably be rescue out of the shuttle windows, Marty. She'd be training there, but I've never seen an astronaut in that configuration. There you have Wendy Lawrence. And here's another cool picture, literally cool because it's cold out, in Star City, where Wendy served as the NASA Director of Operations in Russia at Star City, coordinating the U.S.-Russian Mir space program. She was going to stay up there for a 4-month duration, and when they got to the spacesuit training, she was too short for the Russian spacesuits. Sokol's the name of those spacesuits. So David Wolf ended up taking her place as the last person to spend time on the Russian Mir space station. So we love her a lot. Love to hear her stories there. There I am with Marty Winkel and Anita Truex, our office manager, who loves to go out there and hear the astronauts. She was wearing a mask because it wasn't COVID times, but people were sick and maybe she had something going on and didn't want to wear the mask there. But that's my way of introducing the fact that when you meet people, and Marty, when we meet people out there, it's like people anywhere. You don't know their backgrounds. You don't know everything that they went through. And you just think, well, she worked hard. She was in the Navy, she had all the credentials. And then you got to have a lot of luck on your side to be an astronaut. After all, only about 400 of the 617 humans that have orbited the Earth have been American. So what inspired her? Where did she get her drive to do this? And it's definitely from her father. And in doing some research here, I came across something that Wendy wrote. I couldn't find the date on it, but it's in the Guidepost magazine, which is a spiritual type of magazine for Christians, I believe. And I'm going to read a lot of this. I got my glasses on, but there she is with her father, William Lawrence, U.S. Navy Vice Admiral William Lawrence, who had a battleship destroyer. A destroyer is named after him. USS William P. Lawrence, DDG-110 for you Navy people out there. He was a POW in the Vietnam War, and just not a POW. He was in the Hanoi Hilton for 6 years. Those of you baby boomers out there know about that atrocity. And then he was superintendent of the Navy Academy his last 3 years, when his daughter was in the second Navy class that allowed women on there. So this pioneering astronaut looked up to her war hero dad. All right. She says she was 35 years, 67, Astrolab. And it was the culmination of a dream I'd nurtured since watching the Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969. Back then, 10-year-old girls like me had no hope of becoming an astronaut. Somehow I held on to my dream, and in many ways I owe my perseverance to the man I wish could have been beside me as I stared out the shuttle window on my first flight in the awe-inspiring vastness of space. That man was my father, U.S. Navy Vice Admiral William Lawrence. And you better believe I'm going to get verklempt a few times reading this, because this is one hell of a story. Wendy Lawrence says, my relationship with my dad was complicated, and it was also the most important influence on who I was to become in life. I want to tell you about the relationship, Wendy Lawrence says, for two reasons. One, I want you to know my dad the way I knew him. He was a man of indomitable will, unshakable faith in Jesus, and unwavering commitment to duty and country. And two, he was also imperfect, as I am. And as we tried to build a relationship from scratch during my teen years, I inherited my dad's personality. He and I sometimes disagreed. Some of the biggest lessons I learned from him came from watching him deal with setbacks. And Wendy goes on to say in this piece that she wrote, the biggest lesson I learned is that no family relationship is beyond the reach of God's grace. Now, here's a story about her dad. He was always on his way to be a tremendous Navy aviator. He was lost. He was a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, a test pilot. He wanted to become an astronaut and was in the queue to be part of the Mercury. He was interviewed for the Mercury astronauts, disqualified by a heart murmur. And so he was away from home a lot. And in the Vietnam War, he was shot down in 1967 and declared missing in action, MIA. My family feared he was dead. I was not quite 8 years old. While in prison, my dad was tortured, including being thrown in a 6-foot box called the Black Hole of Calcutta. Despite that, he became a leader among his fellow prisoners, helping devise a code to communicate by tapping on cell walls and floors, the famous tap code. Who was in the Hanoi Hilton with him? Well, you know John McCain, American senator who died not too long ago. He called Mr. Williams the greatest man I ever met, is how John McCain characterized Bill Lawrence. Dad did not waste time feeling sorry for himself. He trusted God and did his best by staying positive, by praying, composing poetry, and mentally reliving the most meaningful moments of his life. All right. Wendy said that I personally had inherited from my dad the pragmatic discipline and focusedness on solving problems. I prayed and hoped Dad was still alive, but I also feared being disappointed, so I didn't dwell on it a lot. He was the father I really didn't know or would know. Then, in 1973, Dad returned home as a hero. There he is there. It was a shock to learn he was coming home. Years earlier, Mom had concluded that Dad was no longer alive. She had remarried and let many of Dad's things go. I was almost 13 when we learned he was coming home, too young to understand my mom's feelings. Now, suddenly, my 2 siblings and I were with Dad's parents at an Air Force base in Tennessee, watching the freed prisoners come down the steps of the military transport. He looked older than I remembered, thinner. I should have been overcome with emotion and run into Dad's arms, but after such a long time, he was like a stranger. I hugged Dad anyway, as good a hug as I could muster, and I stared. I didn't know what to say. It didn't take long for my confused feelings to resolve into action. I want to live with my dad, I said to my mom. Well, he underwent rehabilitation in Washington, D.C., as did all the POWs, and he chose to remain in the Navy, and that's he went to California Air Force Station. That's when I went to live with him, Wendy Lawrence says. He ended up marrying a woman named Diane, his physical therapist, who worked with returning soldiers. Though I stayed close with my mom, Diane became a second mother to me. So Wendy worked with her dad a lot, just as before. She grew up close to him. He loved football, so I watched games with him. He taught me to play tennis. I emulated his commitment to competition and sportsmanship. Her dad, by the way, was a champion in his senior years in tennis. Though I had asked about his war service, Dad didn't want to talk about it. He told only positive stories, such as how God had helped him and how he'd helped develop the tap code. He showed me the knuckle on his right hand, still swollen from many years of tapping. He could tap out whole chapters of the Bible. Not sure how that was done. I'm going to look into that. And then we had our major first disagreement when the Naval Academy made the historic decision to admit women. My immediate thought was, I can become an astronaut. Well, this was 1990. The first class included Astronaut K. Hire, and then she was in the second class. My dad's response was to me, are you sure that's a good idea? Dad wasn't opposed to the idea of women serving in the military. He feared I wouldn't fit in with the Academy's all-male culture. Deep down, he wanted to protect me. Dad told me you'll work twice as hard to get half the recognition. They will not go easy on you. And I said I was ready, said Wendy Lawrence. And Wendy's stepmom, Diane, told her husband, she's ready, Bill. And Wendy says, I'm lucky to have Diane in my corner. She had an answer for all my dad's reservations. So guess who was named the superintendent of Navy Academy after I enrolled? That was her dad, who was the person over the whole academy. And I gave him a warning before graduation. I'm going to hug you on stage. Well, graduation day, he greeted so many people during the festivities, he forgot my warning. I was the 12th in my class. I stepped up to get my diploma. Dad automatically held out his hand. I batted it away and instead threw my arms around him. The crowd roared. That's what a moment. Dad was a hard person to get to know. Looking back, I realized I got to know him by following in his footsteps and even going where he wasn't able to go himself. I became a pilot and flew on naval vessels just like Dad. I applied to NASA just like Dad and trained to be an astronaut just like my dad. Dad was in his 60s when NASA selected me for the astronaut program. He told me he was proud and just a little bit jealous. I was allowed to invite a number of people come, of course, to my launch, and Dad was on the top of my list. That's when she thought about there was not a lot of time for shuttle and rumination when she was looking out the window and wished he was there. 7 months after that launch, our relationship would change yet again. He had some surgery, and a dislodged piece of plaque caused him to have a stroke. And he survived partially the stroke and partially paralyzed on one side, his speech and memory affected. Wendy says she moved to Virginia and spent weekends with her dad, helping care for him and just sitting around and talking to him. After a lifetime of often business-like conversations, Dad and I were now talking about everything. We were talking about space, naval service, the academy, and of course, football. Dad's faith was like everything else in his life, not showy, focused on the practical. He and I didn't talk about God much. We didn't have to. When you serve in the military, you learn pretty quick that you are not the most important person in any given situation. You are part of a team, and you defer to the people in charge. Dad always knew that God is the ultimate one in charge. In that way that we developed, he knew that I knew that too. So to conclude this wonderful little essay that Wendy Williams wrote about her father. She says, the most important thing I learned from my relationship with Dad was the power of grace. When Dad was shot down, I feared a father I barely knew was gone forever. His return to my life was a gift from God, a gift that shaped my life and the person I am. That's so beautiful. Dad taught me to see life itself as a gift. He took nothing for granted after his time in the Hanoi Hilton. He wasn't an emotional, demonstrative person, but by the time he died at age 75, I knew without a doubt that he loved me, and I knew that I loved him. That was the greatest gift of all. And that's how Wendy Lawrence concludes her little story about her father, Admiral William Lawrence. A great man for sure there. So I dug a little deeper on Mr. Lawrence's life, and while a prisoner of war, he mentally composed poetry to keep his spirits up. Yes, that is the outline of the great state of Tennessee, my adopted hometown. I lived right up there in Bristol, at the upper East Tennessee area up there for almost 35 years, Bristol, Johnson City, and Kingsport. 10 hours to get from there over to Memphis. But Admiral Lawrence was born in Nashville, and he composed by memory during 60 days of solitary confinement the poem he called "O Tennessee, My Tennessee." And in 1973, the poem was adopted by the Tennessee State Legislature as the official poem of the state of Tennessee. I didn't know there was such a thing. I guess we'll have to look up the official poem of Florida, Marty, or you and me start ciphering one out there. But I'm going to read this to end today to give you a mindset of somebody in 60-day solitary confinement thinking about their homeland. This is by Admiral William Lawrence. O Tennessee, my Tennessee, what love and pride I feel for thee. You proud old state, the volunteer, your proud traditions I hold dear. I revere your heroes who bravely fought our country's foes, renowned statesmen so wise and strong, who served our country well and long. I thrill at thought of mountains grand, rolling green hills and fertile farmland, earth rich with stone, mineral and ore, forests dense and wild flowers galore, powerful rivers that bring us light, deep lakes with fish and fowl in flight, thriving cities and industries, fine schools and universities, strong folks of pioneer descent, simple, honest, and reverent. Beauty and hospitality are the hallmarks of Tennessee, and o'er the world as I may roam, no place exceeds my boyhood home, and oh, how much I long to see my native land, my Tennessee. Well, God rest in peace there, Admiral Lawrence, and God bless you, Wendy Lawrence, for sharing this beautiful essay about your father, and we are certainly glad to share that with you today on Stay Curious on your 65th birthday. So we can't wait to see you out there at the Kennedy Visitors Complex and just tell you what a wonderful dad we think you had. So until tomorrow, when we're going to talk about some shuttles of the month and some other things to go into our 4th of July holiday. Marty, you had something that you wanted to add there, sir.
Well, I was just going to tell you there is a Florida poem. It's called "I Am Florida" by Alan Autry Sr. You can read it tomorrow.
Well, I might do that tomorrow then. Okay, thank you, Marty, for looking that up on there. Always my efficient fact checker there. But we hope you enjoyed that little different twist on our Stay Curious today. Really moved by what Wendy Lawrence said about her dad, and all of you baby boomers that grew up with me, like me, and were involved with the Vietnam War, which I say I was because I was in the next last draft and didn't know what I would have faced over there on there. So we appreciate Keith Sewell listening today. Thank you, Keith. Our retiree traveling around. Gary Gerald's up there in Georgia. Dean Babcock, thank you for supporting us. Tom Celentano does. Tom Usiak, Doug Forrest. We got Mitch Rothman watching at NASA Manned Space, Facebook, Dave Stange, and Steve Jokum. So hope you all have a great holiday. We will be back with you tomorrow to button things up on some Space Coast news going around here. So until next time, I'm Marquette saying I can't wait to see you in our museum to bridge the space between us.